The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., March 11, 2025. I hereby appoint the Honorable Monica Dela Cruz to act as Speaker Pro Tempore on this day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 3rd, 2025, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for the morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize and congratulate Juso Young of Port Allegheny, Pennsylvania. Juso recently accepted a fully qualified appointment to the United States Military Academy in West Point, New York.